So, have you ever been really let down by the second book in a series due to a massive tone shift? Well, maybe massive is overselling it a little bit, but I recently read book two of Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar. And after loving the first book, I was a bit, lukewarm on the second book, Conqueror's Blood. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, Conqueror's Blood, the second book in Gunmetal Gods. So, hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Zach. This is mostly just science fiction and fantasy book reviews. And yes, I love a great world building story. I love Gunmetal Gods. I thought it was a really unique take on epic fantasy, on grimdark fantasy. It sets up this world with jinns and magic and eldritch horrors in this Middle Eastern inspired story that just felt so real, so fresh. The world building, the way Akhtar uses words to describe things. I felt that being in the spice markets, that I was eating the desserts, smoking the hookah with Keva, smelling all the spices. It just felt so real, so lived in. And yes, that is here in book two, Conqueror's Blood. But where's Keva? Where's Micah the Metal? So we lose our main characters that I started loving in the first book and shift to two other new characters. So this really felt like I'm also reading Malazan. So it felt a bit like Deadhouse Gates, if you've ever read Malazan, which is a like separate story to what we just saw in the first book, and that's what's going on here. So while the first book of Gunmetal Gods focused on the conflict of Keva versus Micah, and we got that two POV shifting from book one, that returns here in book two. And if I had to maybe sum it up, the story, the tagline for the book, well, how the publisher sells it is Game of Thrones meets Arabian Nights with Eldritch Horrors. And I think this leans into the Game of Thrones aspect. So if you liked political intrigue and that more behind the scenes versus epic battles, maybe you'll get what you're looking for in Conqueror's Blood. But for me, it didn't totally work. So the positives, and not to be all totally negative on this, is yes, the world is the same. So this story, the second story, Conqueror's Blood, does take place in the exact same world, the same kingdoms, Alania, that we learned and loved from the first book. So the writing and the world building does feel familiar. And yes, the world, it's great. I love the Middle Eastern culture here. It's full on display in the second book. It really still had that same feeling, that Middle Eastern Ottoman Empire kind of feeling to the story. But what didn't work, and where I thought the book was going as I read it, was it introduced a new magic system. So we also get two new characters, which does follow the structure of the first book. So like we had two male characters that were more on the warlord side of things, like fighting with their armies and battles. And just really interesting because, like, Keva, for example, is kind of that washed up retired hero that gets drawn back into battle one more time. In this second book, we follow two female characters and we switch POVs between the two characters throughout the book, just like we did in the first book. But it is a sultana and then a witch, and it's this kind of cat and mouse game. I mean, that's reducing it too much, but it's a struggle between the two sides again, where one side, or they're both trying to kind of figure out each other and what's going on in this palace intrigue kind of story. And we do flip between the two characters. So we do see two sides of a conflict, just like we did in the first book, but it's focused on, like, I guess, a smaller scale than armies and empires, which we saw in book one. And it's just more of this kind of assassination plot, with the added difference also being that sort of threw me out of the book, that we also get a new magic system. So this could be a positive or negative depending on what you're into. But this second book introduces blood magic, and that's where the title comes from, Conqueror's Blood. So this is apparently something that's in the world, but different from the magic system we learned about in the first book. So you could look at it as expanding the world building, which it absolutely does, because it takes place in the same Ottoman inspired empire world, that Middle Eastern world. And where in the first book, we got the glimpses of jinns and this jinn magic system where our characters, or the mages from the story, sort of borrow their powers by seeing on the other side of the world. They see kind of the magical fairy world, to put it in generic terms, and then they're able to interact with and form kind of bonds with the jinns and the magical creatures, and then borrow some of their energy, which is, I think, again, it wasn't totally explained well in the first book, so I'm only going on what I know from books 1 and 2, but that is totally not here in the second book at all. So we get this new blood-based magic system, which is, to the author's credit, developed in a way that this has always been in the Empire, because we know our characters are studying the text to learn about this blood system, and it's ingrained in the culture. So it is fleshed out and makes sense inside the context of the story that, yes, this blood magic has always been around. But because it's the second book in a series, I already knew about the other magic system, and now we're getting to this new system. So I was just waiting for it to somehow connect to what we already learned in the first book. So this book did feel almost like a standalone. So taken in context, you could probably read this totally by itself and not need the first book at all. But because it takes place as a second book, I was waiting for more of a connection. And again, as a positive, we do see Keva he makes an appearance about halfway through the story. And that's where I thought, okay, great. This is that inciting moment. And that first 40% of the novel was just an extended prologue, and we're learning new characters, but now Keva's going to weave in, and then we'll eventually get Micah, and it's going to all mesh together from what we've learned in the first book. But Keva makes his brief appearance, and then he goes back to training. So he ends up in the same spot that he was in book 1, and we follow, the characters, the 2 female characters, through the rest of the novel, and even the magic system and what the not the spine, but the blurb sold me on the book, that this is Lovecraftian eldritch horrors, that they play a part in the world. And that was absolutely one of my favorite parts of the first book, how it was this grimdark story where gods are intervening indirectly in the lives of mortals, which is a great trope that I love. And the gods in this case are eldritch horror, these cosmic horrors that are influencing our world. I was like, oh, that's so cool. You see it on the cover, like, oh man, that's awesome. When are we going to see those? And we do in the first book. And okay, yes, we get one scene. I think it's one scene, maybe it was 2 in the second book. That's how the impression left me. We'd see one of the angel characters, but it wasn't like a big part of the story. So while it does happen, and it felt almost like a throw in, like, okay, yes, this is still the same world on the cosmic level that the first book was, but everything else is very grounded on our 2 characters in this political assassination intrigue story. And yeah, so if you liked Game of Thrones for the political intrigue and more of the castle politics and the harem and the sultan, sultana, and that sort of aspect of it, like a political thriller, hey, you're going to like Conqueror's Blood, because this is Game of Thrones, the politics side. But if you like Game of Thrones for the magic and the monsters and the dragons, that was book 1. That was the cool stuff in book 1, and that's not here in book 2. So overall, what I got out of it was like a lukewarm 3.5 out of 5 for me. Whereas the first one was one of my favorite books I read in 25. It was a 5 out of 5 for me. But this second book, I felt just missed the mark for what my expectations were going into it. With the world that was set up, I was just really invested in it and was hoping to continue that. And I didn't get that here in the second book. But this may work for you if you like some of those more, again, the political aspects of the first book, the empires, the world building, and you weren't so focused on the magic system and the eldritch horrors and the cosmic gods. So it depends what you're looking for. This may or may not be up your alley. It was still an okay read. I mean, the author has a great way with words. I love the descriptions of the world. It still felt like the Middle Eastern Ottoman Empire we got in the first book. So it felt connected. It felt real, but the characters and the plot just didn't really hit for me. And that's one of those cases where, yes, art is subjective. It didn't work for me, but looking at Goodreads, it still has over a 4 rating. So obviously a lot of people do like this. I'm in the camp that was on the slightly negative, like a 3.5 star rating for Goodreads on this, but maybe you'll enjoy it. But please tell me if you read Conqueror's Blood, book 2 of Gunmetal Gods, and if you've read book 3. Does it get better? Do we get back to Keva in the third book? Should I continue and soldier on? I was a bit let down, but I am hesitant to continue because of the direction the second book, but I guess I'll check out the blurb and see if the third book returns us to our characters that we know and love, just like Malazan did. So Memories of Ice, the third book of Malazan, did finally return to the Bridge Burner. So maybe we'll see. But thanks for watching this review. Please let me know if you read book 2, Conqueror's Blood, and more importantly, if you've read book 3 of Gunmetal Gods, and if I should continue the series. So thanks for watching this review. Hope you have a great day. See ya.